Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Dark Funeral, We Are the Apocalypse, out March 18th on Century Media Records. The album has 9 tracks, 44 minutes in length, and this is the band's 7th full-length studio album. They are a Swedish black metal band. As far as the design for this record goes, this is an album that brings in 2 different approaches and blends them in and creates a new way of creating an album. On one hand, you have a record that has a nucleus. The sound has a nucleus, the way it's put together has a nucleus, and this stays intact from the first track all the way to the last. Everything that these songs have that are similar to one another don't really change, which gives the record a sense of mobility, a sense of fluidity, but also a sense of linearity from start to finish. It's a very robust, balanced record from that perspective. That nucleus stays intact. Outside of that nucleus, you have some volatility. The sound expands and contracts from track to track. The way they did that is by making the volume increase, adding substance, and then decreasing that, removing a little bit of intensity, removing a little bit of aggression, adding a little bit more atmosphere. So these movements that are happening outside of the nucleus is what making the album have ripples, is what making this album have ebbs and flows. So you're able to create an album that feels as one, that has a sense of connectivity between every single track, but it doesn't sound repetitive because you have this movement that is happening outside of that nucleus that makes the album feel very dynamic and very engaging. Once you move into the soundscape, obviously this is a Dark Funeral record and they're not reinventing the wheel. So you're going to get that grimy, dark, sinister sound from start all the way to the finish. Now the sound on this album also has a little bit of a duality to it. When you're listening to it, you feel at times that the record is very dark, it's very sinister, very penetrating, that it just really cuts through and it almost doesn't have substance to it. It feels thin. Some tracks, you feel like the album has all of this sound, it has this robust nature to it, it's very texture, that it has depth to the experience. And this is where that contracting and expanding comes in. The structure is really defined by this soundscape. And some songs you feel like the record is larger than life because it has all of these elements that are making the album and making the songs expand. And then you have the other tracks that are contracting the album, that are removing some of those elements and becoming a little bit more bare bones while keeping that nucleus intact on every single track throughout the entire experience. This is the movement that the album has. So it's really interesting because you are always changing your perception of what the album is giving you. This allows the similarities to stay constant and allows the playability of the record to be increased. You really feel like the album has life. You feel like the album has perhaps not soul, but definitely a heartbeat. And the soundscape that it carries it is very noticeable. It becomes very well defined with all the elements having their own role and their importance in creating that experience. You look, for example, at the bass. I love the bass on this record. It doesn't pop all the time. It's not always in the forefront, but it's definitely a pillar, and you're going to hear it a lot throughout the entire record. And it helps create shapes, it helps create that substance of sound. The songs that have more volume, the songs that have more depth, the bass is definitely more predominant on those tracks. The ones that feel a little bit more driven, a little thinner, you feel more the guitars driving the experience. And when you look at the sound on this record, you have the drums on one end, you have the vocals on the other, and then the volatility of the guitars or the diversity of the guitars squeezed in right in between. The bass is kind of the glue that holds it all together. The drums on this album sound phenomenal as well. I like the fact that they're powerful, very robust, and they don't overpower the experience. Like I said before, you really feel like they're on one end of the spectrum while the vocals are on the other and guitars in the middle. Everything has its own lane, and it's really easy to define which lanes these different elements are on. But the overall drum sound, it's really impactful and really creates a robust experience and helps ground the record all around. Now, once you move into the guitars drive the experience. A lot of the contracting and expanding that you're going to witness throughout this entire record is really defined by what the guitars are doing. If they're a little bit more driven, or if they're a little bit more melodic, or if they're expanding and matching what the drums, bass, and vocals are doing and becoming almost epic. So that is going to be the motor that's really going to define exactly what's happening throughout the entire album. But the guitar sound is phenomenal. It has a lot of life in it, and it has also a lot of darkness at the same time. And when it moves into a more melancholic approach, it feels very welcoming. So you're always able to keep the listener engaged with the experience regardless of exactly what you're giving as far as the guitars are concerned. Vocally, the album is super consistent from start to finish. There are some ripples, or there are some additions, some spices, if you will, throughout the entire record. I like a lot of the backing vocals that they use, the layers that they use in order to create some volume, in order to create some expansion of the vocal tracks, making them feel a little bit larger, making them feel a little bit bigger, allowing the songs to also feel a little bit larger and a little bit bigger. This also helps that expanding and contracting that I was talking about before. Using spoken word throughout the record was really interesting because it allows you to connect with the lyrical content and therefore with the overall message that the songs have. This is an important element for this record because I really connected with the overall lyrical content. I thought was really engaging, was really interesting, and it was something that allowed me to digest the tracks a little bit better in terms of how it was approached from start to finish. Overall, this is a very strong record. When you look at the musical approach that it has, when you look at the diversity of styles, having this ability to create a core and then create some volatility around it was something that I really enjoyed. The structure of the album is also super interesting because it really flies, it really helps the mobility of the album all around. And then the vocals create these bookends with the drums that make the experience very robust. And I really like the tone and I really like the delivery. I felt like it enhanced the overall experience and definitely helped the atmosphere of this record. A lot of times when you're listening to this album, you feel like there is an emotional baggage associated with some of these songs, and it comes into the forefront, not because of the soundscape, not because of an element within that soundscape, but because of how the vocals are portraying those lyrics. So very interesting, very strong album across all of the different elements. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with When Our Vengeance Is Done. Dark, melodic, and heavy. That's pretty much the core of this track. The vocals will guide you through. They really help you transition from portions of this track, help you navigate, if you will, from start to finish. A song that's built like a movie score, and then the vocals are there to help you guide the experience or create what the movie is all about. So it really allows the lyrics to come into the forefront. The vocals and lyrics become one because one is the extension of the other, and the sound in the background plays the backdrop of what is happening lyrically and what is happening vocally. The drums are outstanding on this track. The guitars create movement. They drive the song. Very dynamic track. The bass undertone from start to finish, obviously it peaks in and then it drops out, but from start to finish the bass undertone is just absolutely phenomenal on this track, really creating a subtle but important impact into the overall experience of the track. Next you have When I Am Gone, my absolute favorite song on this album. It feels and it sounds like a black metal ballad. That's how it comes across. It has all of those ballad elements in terms of the atmosphere, in terms of the emotion that it carries, and even in the way it is constructed. It starts off very stripped down, then it gains some momentum, it becomes a little bit bigger, but it never really explodes. It's very methodic, it moves very slowly. It allows the vocals to just kind of walk you through the entire song, and it's more about the emotions that the track represents musically and vocally than having a track that just comes at you really fast, really aggressive, really intense. This song is completely different. It has a different demeanor to it, and that's why I said it feels like a black metal ballad, and the way everything comes together. I just love how this track sounds and how this track feels. Last but not least, you have Beyond the Grave, pedal to the metal with this song. Very intense, very direct, with some ripples in it. It has a feeling of never losing time because it never lets you really rest, it never really lets you breathe. It's all about holding on to it and going in for a ride that has this forward motion to it, and it just completely obliterates everything in its path. Now there are a few pauses here and there. There's a little bit of a bridge that slows down things, but by the end of the song you don't really remember the slower moments that the track had. It's all about that robust movement that carry itself forward. That's what it stays with you. That is what Beyond the Grave is all about. Pedal to the metal. This is it. Dark Funeral with We Are the Apocalypse, out March 18th on Century Media Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.